Welcome to our final segment of In Conversation With. I'm joined today by David Pitt, CEO of Pay.UK, which runs the UK's retail payments operations and is transforming the way that payments are delivered in the UK. David joined Pay.UK in July 2021 and has a strong and successful track record delivering high-profile projects both in the UK and internationally. He also has a great deal of experience leading organizations through periods of transformational change. Welcome, David. We're thrilled that you can join us today.
Thanks, Tracey. And listen, I'm thrilled I could be there. I'd rather be with you in person, but it's great to be with you virtually. And it's great to collaborate and learn from each other. So thanks for the invitation.
No, it's great. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a little bit of UK praise. I've been working in payments for quite some time, and I started in the early 2000s, which is a long time ago now. But I feel like we have been looking to the UK for lessons learned, for guidance, for the right way to do things for 2 decades now. And I'm a little bit jealous that you're always there ahead of us in Canada, but I want to thank you and your countrymen for giving us great examples on how to launch EMV. I think you launched your Faster Payments Initiative in 2008, so we're not going to go live with ours until next year. But the UK has really been a leader in payments. So I'm curious, 2008 was many years ago. Can you share a little bit about what you're up to these days and what your top priorities are?
Listen, and thanks for the kind words. And also I'd just say, as Tracey said, I'm fairly fresh into Pay.UK. And it's great to be having these conversations. I think Tracey and myself have caught 3 or 4 times already since I started. Maybe if I start by giving you a wee bit of flavour of what Pay.UK does and the size and scale, and then I'll talk about our current initiatives. So we deal with about 10 billion transactions on a yearly basis, account-to-account transfers that represent about £8 trillion across the UK. Our volumes are around 1,500 transactions per second. And one of the things, like Canada, we are focused on the future. Now, how do we drive robustness and resilience in those rails? Because we're driving critical national infrastructure. But also, how do we think about the future? How do we build? How do we think? And how do we develop for the future? Really, really important to us that we are in control of that. So I want to talk about a few of our initiatives. First and foremost, it's about systemic risk. How do we manage risk? And how do we manage risk across our payment rails? How do we really think about what's going to happen and be ahead of it so we can make sure they are robust and resilient? And one of the things that Tracey talked around is we launched Faster Payments in 2008. And actually we're going into our next round of how we update our systems to the next payment architecture, the new payment architecture for the future. And that is one of our key focus and our key deliverables. Thinking about how can we take real-time payments to the next generation? How do we think about a flexible system that's going to build for the future? So we're building something for the future, not building a legacy. That has to be flexible, it has to be adaptable, it has to be at the right price point, but underpinning that has to be robust and resilient. And it's striking that balance that becomes real important. And if anything, that is our main focus. How do we deliver the future? But like anything, that takes time. So what are we doing in the meantime? So Tracey, we're focused on things like systemic risk in the ecosystem. We're focused on things like fraud. How do we help our customers, the banks, control fraud, reduce fraud, but also think about the future? What do we need to be doing to collaborate for the future to keep that level of control of fraud? And I think it's really important just to strike that balance, focus on the here and now, but have that lens to the future. And we're trying to do both, which isn't easy. Thinking about the build for the future, but thinking about the here and now.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I'm curious to dig in a little bit to the future. Some things that we think about at Payments Canada that I'm quite confident you're also thinking about at Pay.UK are cross-border real-time payments and also central bank digital currency. And I'm curious to hear from you how Pay.UK is thinking about those opportunities. That's how we'd like to view them. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about your role and how those 2 capabilities might change payments for the globe?
So I think with the cross-border piece, it's really important that we maintain relationships like this and really think about how we collaborate across different payment systems to really think about, one, learning from each other, as you mentioned before, but also making sure that we understand how that can build for the future. So thinking about, how we engage, thinking about how we collaborate, but also builds into the flexibility that we're building in our system for the future. So how do we build that flexibility to cope? And then how do we build that ease of development so we can move and change for the future? I think that becomes important for not only cross-border, but also for digital currency. On the digital currency side, we're engaging with the Bank of England. We're involved in their think tank for the future, but we're also engaged with our own system, making sure it's flexible, making sure it can cope with digital currency and actually can adapt, because I'm not quite sure we all know the answers yet. But what is really important is that we build flexibility to be able to cope, to be able to pivot, but also to be able to experience, and as I said in my first answer, not build a legacy system. So Tracey, those kind of things we've got in our mindset, we've got in our discussions, and I think it comes down to staying close to collaboration with our customers, but also with different territories like this.
Great, thank you. I know you've only been the CEO since July 2021, but I've got to imagine that you've had the opportunity to deal with some of the impacts of COVID, not only on the payments ecosystem more broadly, but also on your organization. Here in Canada, we've seen an incredible pace of change. We thought payments were moving pretty quickly, but definitely turned up the dial over the last couple of years. And so I'm curious, how has the pace of change impacted Pay.UK in its position in the ecosystem? But also, can you share a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted your organization and the employees that work at Pay.UK?
So maybe if you give me the permission, I'll start at the end, because I think our colleagues, as we both agree and talk about regularly, underpin what we do. And therefore, how we engage with our colleagues is really important. And we made the move to work from home as most territories did. But during that period, we also actually improved employee engagement. And it was really critical that we did that. And that took a lot of communication, it took a lot of work, it took a lot of leadership, but also took a lot of engagement from our colleagues as one. Not only to deliver robust and resilient systems during that period, but actually to respond to the needs of our government. We processed all the furlough payments during that period and had to move very quickly to respond as an industry. And I think, just picking up on your point about the pace of change, yes, the pandemic has definitely driven trends like digital, but also actually it's given us some lessons. How can you respond quicker when you're faced with something like that? And actually, how do we take those lessons back into our normal way of life and thankfully getting back to some shape of normality? How do you not lose that pace, but at the same time really balance that with not moving too quickly to put at risk any of the robustness and resilience? And we're trying to think about how we do that, whether that's into hybrid working, where we've now returned to the office 2 days a week, providing flexibility for our colleagues the remainder of the time, but also when we're back in the office, making sure we're making best use of collaboration time, face-to-face meetings, and also playing our part with mental health and awareness, and actually getting that engagement going that you do struggle to get, whether it's over Zoom or Teams. And then when you think of our customers, that pace of change is demanding. And I don't think it's going to go away. We're in the unique position in the UK that our service isn't mandated. And I always talk about we have to earn the right to continue to operate. So how do we continue to do that? And change is important. Delivering value, thinking about our customers, staying ahead of the game if we can, and really thinking of the future. So we're building that future rather than responding to it when it's here. And I think we've just got to face the reality. You need to keep changing. because if you don't, you're just going to die. And one of the things for me that I think becomes really important is the mix between our colleagues, our customers, our regulators and our stakeholders, to really think of that systemic risk for the future and think of what we need to do and plan, and then how do we deliver it together. So Tracey, I think my overall message is the pandemic's taught us a lot of things. And for me, change is just a way of life now. And we've been doing that since 2018 when we were established. But I do agree totally, the pace is upped and we need to respond to it.
Yeah, I think we're feeling that very clearly here in Canada and at Payments Canada in particular. No shortage of projects. Our modernization initiative here is aggressive. We've replaced our high value payment system, turned that on in August of last year. The real-time system targeted for June of next year, and we still have a roadmap of things that we need to do in Canada to modernize our payment systems. And as we think about these projects and the pace of change, one of the things I'm curious to chat with you about is how are you attracting and retaining your people? Payments is a hot skill in Canada. I would imagine is probably the same. Any industry where the pace of change is high. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on attraction and retention of key resources.
Yeah, and I think it probably comes together with the old saying that if you don't get your culture right, and if you don't retain the right talent, you can forget about delivering your strategy. And culture eats strategy for breakfast, as they say. So one of the things we did right at the start when I joined is we did a culture survey. That gave us a lot to build upon and really make sure we have the right values and also the right culture across our colleagues and across our business. And then that's got to be mixed with what you were saying around the right retention, development of your own talent, but also the right capabilities for the future. So a lot of things about planning, thinking about, the strategy, thinking ahead about, the disciplines you need for the future, and then working with our own people strategy to think about what does that mean to talent development, and actually how do you build those skills in individuals, but also how do you develop real strong leadership so you get to the right motivations, you also get to the right values. And one of the things we've been focusing on, and we've still got a way to go, is to really work better across the matrix. Not working in silos, but actually thinking about how we come together to prioritise our projects, but then think about how we work together using different skills from different areas, but also across our ecosystem. How do we engage with the regulators? How do we use those skills that might be more apparent with our customers, the banks, than it is in Pay.uk, and really engage that communication, but think ahead so we can get the best outcomes for the industry, for our customers, but ultimately for the UK economy as well. So I would just say, Tracey, I'm really proud that our retention rate is really high. Our attrition rate is below the average across the UK, but we're not being complacent. And one of the things I find within payments, we have a real depth of knowledge, but we need to make sure that knowledge continues to transfer to the new generation in the future, and really think about how we continue to evolve. It probably plays to the last question as well about change. Change only gets delivered if you have the right capabilities. So how do you bring them together and really map that out? And that's important around our strategy, our business planning, our prioritisation, but ultimately underpinned by our talent and our colleagues and our people to make it happen.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that information with us, and congratulations. I like that culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's good.
Yeah, I think, Tracey, one of the things I get when we speak together is I think it's really important. Tracey mentioned earlier the good relationship that we have, and actually, I think you are very complimentary, but I think it goes both ways. Because culture is really important, and collaboration, sharing is critical, and how we learn snippets from each other is gold, to be honest with you. Whether that's challenges we've had in the past, so that helps us challenge yourself about maybe going down the same road, or indeed successes, and how we share. And I always say to all my colleagues, there's nothing wrong with actually sharing and then stealing good ideas with pride, and putting them into action. And I think it does come back to that culture. You've got to have the right culture to be able to challenge each other, support each other. And one of our values is about constructive challenge, so we get the best out of each other. Not easy to achieve, and I'm not saying we achieve it always, but it's something we're determined to really hit home and get the value out of those difficult discussions that then drive real benefit for the future.
There is no shortage of difficult discussion in payments. Yeah. I have two crystal ball questions for you. The first one is, how the heck do we get rid of checks? Okay, so that's the first one. And I'll give you the second one so you can think about it when you're answering the first one. If you look into the future, say 5-10 years from now, 3 systems or 2? Do we still have a real time, a batch, and a high value payment system, or do we just have 2 systems?
So first of all, on checks, I think it's a real challenge because I was looking at your numbers and very similar to ours. You're seeing an obvious decline in the volume of checks. I kind of look at this in 2 ways. So how do we provide for vulnerable citizens who do use checks, and how do we provide for certain customers and end users who still value and use checks? But actually, as the volume goes down, how do you become efficient at the same time so that you don't see the cost of checks becoming something that prohibits the continual use and access to that type of payment method? And we kind of say, we want to be the smartest way to move money in the UK. And I think being the smartest way also means that in some occasions you need to think about how you're there for all your customers' needs. And I probably would say I don't see us ever getting rid of checks from a point of view that they completely disappear. But I do see us being innovative. Some of the ways to think about check imaging, some of the ways to think about how we can improve the process probably drives to my mind. On the second point, 5-10 years time, what will payments be like? Well, I think it plays back to your digital currency point. And I wish I had a crystal ball. And I do say this to my colleagues sometimes. If you had the crystal ball, we'd probably all be winning the lottery, right? But one of the things I think is really important is to think of that crystal ball and give yourself choices, flexibility, but also really challenge yourself about the future. We try, and I say try because it's not easy, to really think of the horizon scanning. What's going to be there in the future? What's going to be impacting our customers' needs? Who would have probably thought a few years ago that we'd be in the situation with the pandemic? But actually thinking ahead helps you build that crystal ball, helps you build that flexibility in your system to be able to respond. To answer your question, I do think there'll be less payment systems, but I do think they need to be flexible and be adaptable to be able to give options for our colleagues and indeed the end users. I did say before, we view ourselves, and in 5-10 years' time, I want us to continue to be the smartest way to move money in the UK. And I do probably play back to that point. We're not mandated, so we have to continue to earn our right to operate. So therefore, you do need to stay on your toes, and therefore you do need to think of the future. So it plays to our strategic thinking, horizon scanning, and adaptability.
Oh, that's great. So one last question, and this is in regards to ISO 20022. So we are introducing ISO messaging on our high value payment system this year, later on this year. And when we launch the real-time rail in June of next year, it will be ISO ready. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how can we best articulate the value of ISO? How do we create awareness of the importance and the capabilities of ISO so that that message standard really starts to deliver value, not only in each of our own countries, but around the globe?
Yeah, I mean, just so everyone's aware, we'll be launching the same standard as we move to our new payments architecture. And that's probably one of the points that we'd make. 2008, as you say, we launched our real-time payments. But, that's got to keep moving. It's got to keep developing so we can get into those types of standards and then show the value. I probably mentioned collaboration quite a few times, but the real data sharing drives the real value and the real outcomes. And then I think, to be honest with you, it starts to speak for itself. The use cases come forward, it starts to show the value and actually starts to deliver real difference. But I do think it comes back to making sure we're on the same standard as we will get to when we launch NPA. But then actually, how do we continue to talk, collaborate, and see how that sharing and additional sharing drives real value? But I just give one example that we're seeing. I mentioned fraud. So data sharing and fraud will drive value, but also drives challenge. And I think it's the same with the new standards that we're going to see. It's not going to be easy, but actually challenge in my mind is an opportunity. And then that will drive value as we collaborate and see that coming through.
That's great. Thank you so much. So David, I'm out of hard questions for you. Thank you for being so forthcoming in your answers. A pleasure to spend time with you. I think collaboration was definitely the theme of our discussion today. So, so thank you for raising that. I look forward to our ongoing conversations, and I hope that you're enjoying the summit.
Thanks very much. And listen, thanks everyone for the invitation, and lovely to spend some time with you. Have a great summit.